Today it's kind of a two-parter. I'm going to talk about the plants in it. Let me go over here. I'm going to talk about some of the native plants that you can put around, both berry-producing flowers and for not only birds but for butterflies. And then we're going to turn it over to Tracy and to Tiffany to talk about, because they are intentionally trained at backyard stuff. And I'm more of a bird person, although I do feed my birds. I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. That's what got me through the pandemic. Okay, let's see. Let's get some. Well, let me start this way. Don't worry about writing all my plants down. I brought a list. I've been doing this for 20 years. I hope I brought enough copies. If you're a couple or family, just keep one. But I've been doing this 20 years, and I used to do this about the head of people trying to write as fast as they could. So don't worry. But these are native plants, and some are maybe hard to find. You can go to one of the best places I know of to go to is UT Arboretum has a plant sale every spring, April. I think it's around April 10 and 12 this year. Go there, and a lot of local native nurseries come there to sell their plants. And then if you live near Von Orr, there's Overhill Nursery out there, and he just always raises native plants. And then up in the Clinton Oak Ridge area, there's Naturescapes. Those, just Google them, and you just say, hey, I'm looking for X, do you have any of this? And they say, yeah, I've got something you want to know. So that's how you really have to kind of search for some. These aren't really going to be available at some of the big box stores. Okay, let's get going. One of the chief questions I always get, how do I get cedar waxwings? How do I get cedar waxwings? Well, if you get one, you get 30. But anyway, cedar waxwings are big-time berry eaters as well. And they don't really nest until late in the season, until there's at least some berries out there for them to feed their young. So cedar waxwings is one of those bird. How do I get cedar waxwings? You typically, they will, if you got a holly or something that's full of berries, you'll look out and it'll be 30. Cedar waxwings, they'll eat them all and move on, but that's just, and cedar waxwings love those tent worms that form every spring with the tent. And wild cherry trees, little fuzzy caterpillar, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That's a bird feeder. Very few of those caterpillars survive. So if you got one, say, come on down, guys. And I had one once in a cherry tree, wild cherry tree, off my deck, and I was just watching, waiting. Next thing I knew, cedar waxwings came in and it tore the nest apart, and ate every one of them. So they will also eat caterpillars young. What do it taste like? Okay, let's get moving. Okay, I'm going to get you ready for spring. Because we're all waiting. When do they come back? When do they come back? Typically April. We're going to do a whole talk about it. But here's some of the trees and shrubs that they look for. Red buckeye, I have 2 in my yard. And typically they start, and it's not as tall a tree as yellow buckeye. It is kind of a shrub to tree size, but when it starts to bloom late March and into early April, studies have shown that as the red buckeye starts to bloom further and further and further north, hummingbirds follow it. See, hummingbirds have been doing this much longer than we've been putting out sugar feeders. So whenever I see the red buckeye blooming, that's when I put out my sugar water feeder, typically early April. So that's it, but this is what our beloved ruby-throated hummingbird follows north. Here's another ruby-throated hummingbird plant, coral honeysuckle. It will cover a wall. It's a vine, but it'll cover a wall or an arbor, and it is the only native honeysuckle. And you can see it's a long tubular red flower, and that's what hummingbirds look for. They look for the nectar in the tip, and they splash their faces with pollen. So they move from plant to plant. So this is chiefly pollinated by hummingbirds. So it's coral honeysuckle, and it will cover, again, it's a vine. So if you got a fence or a wall or something you want to grow, and just cover it up. It's a beautiful plant. It blooms kind of early in the season. Columbine. This is a wildflower, and it blooms early in the season too. About the only thing that can pollinate it is a hummingbird, because the pollen is the nectar is way up at the tips, and a hummingbird has to fly upside down, which they can easily do. They like to show off. And they sip the nectar way up in the tips and get the pollen splashed all over their face. So columbine, it's a native wildflower, so if a portion of your yard or garden you want to grow traditional wildflowers, this is one that the hummingbirds will come to. I have it growing off the east side of my house. Here's another red tubular flower. This is a vine that has a long blooming season into the summer. And again, it's chiefly pollinated by a hummingbird that can reach way down in there and get the nectar and get the pollen splashed on his face. It's trumpet creeper. And this is one, if you grow, say, again, on a wall or an arbor or something, you may have to cut it back a little bit every now and then, because this is pretty aggressive. It'll grow, grow, grow. But anyway, it's a beautiful flower. It's a beautiful plant that will cover a wall and has a very long blooming season. Into late summer, I see them. So anyway, that's trumpet creeper. One of my personal favorites, cardinal flower. This is a wildflower, but this one wants to grow in a damper soil. Like at Imes, we grew it. It grew around the pond in the center, but I wanted it. I wanted it at my house, but I live on a ridge and don't have damp soil, unless I'm out there watering. But I tried 2 years ago to do this as a container plant. Pretty easy to keep a container damp. And I bought one of those, half whiskey barrel. It's plastic, I didn't even use the contents. And anyway, now my hillbilly ancestors, anyway, I grew it a year ago and it comes back. And so it's outside my studio in the front of the house where it gets morning sun, and the hummingbirds come up to it all the time. So that's cardinal flower. If you got an area like you do have a pond, it'll go around the pond, or you can do a container gardening with it. And it worked very well. 2 years ago is when I tested it. Bee balm, it's another wildflower that hummingbirds love, and this will grow fairly well in lots of locations, as long as they get some sun. Some sun, not in the shade. I threw this one in. I think a hummingbird will visit it. Mostly what hummingbirds do, I know we think they eat just sugar water. They don't. That's like my coffee I had this morning sitting out in the parking lot. The sugar water gives them pep, but they really eat lots and lots and lots of insects. And they grab the insects off the flowers they visit. And so they eat tons of small flying insects. So that's their protein. But this one, of course, I threw it in because this is the monarch butterfly. We're all supposed to try to grow these for monarchs, because monarchs are, they were on the endangered species list. Now they removed them, and there's more than we thought. But it's still iffy. But this is a plant, I'll warn you, don't put it as the centerpiece of your garden. You want to put it in a ditch line, or if you got extra property, because it spreads. And if you put it in the center as your centerpiece, you go, oh my gosh, I'm going to have monarchs here. Yes, you might, but next thing you know, it takes over. It spreads by runners. So it really does beautifully like in a ditch line, or in a side piece of property, or at the back of your property, because it spreads, spread, and spread. And next thing you know, it'll be popping up in your yard, but you can dig them up and move them if you want. But that's common milkweed. Move on. Now here's a few seed-producing plants. Caden, I threw this in for you because you asked me about indigo buntings. My friend Betty Thompson took the photograph in Kansas, so I have no idea if indigo buntings actually feed on the sunflower seeds. But she took the photo. I was like, well, goodness, maybe it does. I didn't know that. This is another plant that it's native to this country. I know Van Gogh made it famous in France, but it's native to here. Native Americans grew sunflowers for the seeds, just like we do. Anyway, this is another one that you don't want to make it your centerpiece, because the next thing you know, it takes over. And so then if you got a side lot, this is gonna attract some birds. So that's sunflowers. This is one of my absolute favorites for backyard gardening, coneflower. They come in several colors. And my favorite is purple coneflower. I took that photograph at a friend's house, and that is a monarch butterfly. She's using it as a nectaring plant. So birds come later. This is a female monarch. You can tell by the venation on the back wings. But she's nectaring on the purple coneflower. But in the fall, a lot of people want to break those heads off, deadhead them, and maybe get them to bloom again. Don't, because those become bird feeders. Finches go nuts over them, absolute nuts. Who's next? Thistles. Thistles. There's a couple. These are the two native thistles that are native to this area. That's swamp thistle and pasture thistle, and they typically bloom late in the season. But this is the big attractor. This is what female goldfinches want to line her nest with. So goldfinches nest late in season 2. Traditionally, they will nest May into June. Most bird nesting starts February, but goldfinches wait for this. And there's other native flowers that produce down, where it's silky, pappus is the correct botanical term. Silky down, really. It's like dandelions, but dandelions bloom much too early. But anyway, a female goldfinch will grab all of this up and line her nest with it. So if you adore goldfinches and you want to keep them around, this is something. Thistles is another plant you may not want to put as a centerpiece. You maybe want purple coneflower as a centerpiece. But this one, you again put it sideways, so it's somewhere in the side, and it'll spread. But this is, you'll see the goldfinches coming and going, usually into June as they're plucking this silky down out.
Is that all sun or is that partial shade? Is that all sun or can it be partial shade?
I think it can be partially shade. I'm trying to remember where I see them growing. You often see them in a vacant lot, and you're driving around, you see the goldfinches going crazy in June, and I would say partial. Okay? Okay. That's a great question. I should follow up. Okay, now, we're going to wrap up with the berry trees and shrubs. Again, like the cedar waxwings love damn berries. There are birds, as we talked earlier, mockingbirds love berries. In the wintertime, your bluebirds will eat berries, your robins will eat berries, and a lot of worms out. And the one species of warbler that spends its winter with us, the yellow-rump warbler, they eat berries. That's one reason they can stay and not have to migrate out with all the other birds. That's the yellow-rump warbler. And they will all of these birds, I'm getting very interesting birds coming to my bird baths. I stare at my bird bath, and I've had yellow-rump warblers at the bird bath. I had a golden crown kinglet come to my bird bath, especially before we've had all this rain when it was so dry. I had yellow-bellied sapsucker. I had a hermit thrush that came to my bird bath like every morning just to drink. So I think that's that. You know, quick quote. I'm glad we got rain, but my bird bath was very popular for a while. But anyway, I digress. Berry producers, and they're on the list. Black elderberry. It can become very tall, loaded with berries in early summer, or let me say more like August. And you'll find catbirds. Catbirds love to be hiding in a blackberry field or in an elderberry patch. And so an elderberry, it's got a beautiful white bloom earlier in the season, say June, and then in midsummer is when it produces all the berries. And all the berry eaters will come in, like cedar waxwings will come in. So that's black elderberry. Black haw viburnum, that's a plant, I think I took that photograph at Imes. That's the plants that grow between the visitor center and where Tiger, the red-tailed hawk, lives. And I think that's all black haw viburnum growing in there. And this is what the cedar waxwing is feeding on. So black hog, I burn them. And again, some of these are gonna be harder to find, but that's why we're doing this today. You can figure, I don't wanna try some about elderberry, just get on the phone, and call around, to if you Google, native plants, Stanley's in, South Knoxville, close to where I live, they traditionally have many of these there, but call for, say, I'm looking for elderberry, do you have any? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And again, as the other two I mentioned, the one up in Oak Ridge and Clinton is Naturescapes, and then the one out more towards Vonore is Overhill Nurseries. These, if you're looking for a particular one, I would call first, say, hey, I'm looking for elderberry, I'm looking for cardinal flower. So I would tell, yeah, come on down, we got plenty. Okay, move on. Beautyberry. This one is the plant. I took that photograph in front of the building at Ives. It blooms very non-discreetly in July. Tiny little white flowers. You barely notice them. But it was planted there for a reason. It's for this. And then this time of year or a little earlier, it gets these gorgeous, gorgeous magenta berries. And it is a native shrub. It'll slowly take over an area you want to shrub. But this is the time of year. It's one of those things you grow for. It's spectacular. It's like hearts are busting. You want to grow it this time of year because it just looks so gorgeous this time of year. In the fall, we're in earlier. Okay, let's move on. You cannot go wrong with dogwood. It's a native. It blooms in April, I think, April and May, Dogwood Arts Festival time. So you can't go wrong. It's a tall shrub to tree. So it looks gorgeous in the spring. And this time of year, it can have berries that cardinals love. This was sent to me. That's a summer tanager. And summer tanagers would eat these berries too. I see summer tanagers every now and then. It's not common. But that's another reason why you want to put some of these plants out, because you may attract some of these less common birds. When they say, and again, this time of year, the mockingbird is atypical, being so aggressive. Typically this time of year, birds flock to other birds because it's not mating season, it's not territorial season. So that's why you see so many species from now into mid-February, when courtship starts and everything breaks down. But this time of year, they're all hanging out together because there's safety in numbers. And so you'll see not only your normal birds, but you may see something summer tanagers you don't see in the summertime. But anyway, or late fall. Anyway, the unusual birds like I mentioned, like the hermit thrush. That's a very secretive bird. It's called the hermit thrush for a reason, but it was coming, all the other birds were around and it was coming to the bird feeder, so it felt safe. And any one bird that sees danger, Will Robinson, danger, like a Cooper's hawk or a cat or anything, it'll send out an alarm and all the birds disappear. And you've seen that. What happened? I had 25 birds out there. Somebody saw something. It may be the UPS guy. Who knows? Something spooked them. And we love our UPS guys. They work themselves to death. Ron, spice bush, it blooms incredibly early, and then it produces fruit very early too. It's called spice bush. This is what my ancestors would grow and pluck and dry out in their windows, the berries, and then grind them put them through their coffee grinders and sprinkle that ground on their food. It had a spicy flavor. You know, you're living back up in the hills, everything starts to taste the same to you. And so it's called spice bush because that's how they used it. And we're about wrapped up. There's multiple species of holly. Any of the species of holly that are out there, birds love. And when the berries are perfectly ripe and ready, they'll just slowly disappear. And I think I've got one more, winterberry holly. This is an odd holly in that it drops its leaves. So this time of year, it just explodes with berries. There are no, most hollies are evergreen, they keep their leaves year round, but not winterberry holly. So this time of year, it's just an explosion of bright red berries. Okay?
Thank you.
Anyway, now we come if you want to save your questions to the end. Did I go too long? I tried to be quick. If you don't know her, this is Tiffany.
That's Tiffany, I'm Tracy.
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay. So those of you that don't know me, I'm Tiffany. I'm the manager here at the store, and this is Tracy. She's my assistant manager here at the store. So I'm sure you've seen both of us in here a bunch. So we're just going to follow up what Lyn was talking about with how he did the native plants. We're going to do the things that we can offer to the birds to help create this bird-friendly yard. Okay. We'll talk about at the end. The National Wildlife Federation actually has a certification that you can get for there's different habitats, but for a bird-friendly habitat, and there's a couple of things that you have to meet to have in your yard. So we're going to talk about a couple of those things. The three most important things that we always tell people are food, water, shelter. You got to have those three things in your yard if you want to attract the most birds, the most different species of birds. Okay, so those are the three things we're going to touch on. Oh yeah, just to start off with a giggle. Okay, so food. Birds eat by sight. They know what they need and they know what it looks like, and that can change from season to season. Peanuts are a good example of that. So peanuts are high in fat, so that's a very popular food this time of year when it starts to get cold. Cardinals eat peanuts. People are always shocked by that, but you put a shelled peanut out there in the middle of the summer and you're not going to see a cardinal eat it. But you put them out now and you'll start to see cardinals. Bluebirds eat them and stuff like that. So birds don't smell the food, and they have taste buds, but they don't work very well, and they don't depend on them for foods. They don't really taste what the different seeds and stuff taste like. So it's strictly on sight, which is why a lot of we'll talk about that hot pepper options work for critters, to train critters. There's no mess options for different foods, which is important for some people when there's like, yeah, I don't want to feed because I don't want the mess on the ground. So there's always a no mess option that just has no shells. So you can feed off your deck. So you can make any size yard literally into a bird-friendly yard, even if you're just feeding off a deck. We'll talk about some cylinder feeding, which I personally, that's my favorite way to feed because I'd like to say that I'm super interactive with my feeders every day, but I'm not. So with cylinder feeding, it lasts a lot longer, so you're not having to go out there every day or every other day and refill a feeder, okay? Squirrel proof. This is the end-all be-all in squirrel proof feeders. It's the only one that we sell that we actually say is squirrel proof, and it took us probably 2.5 years to buy one because I was like, nothing is squirrel proof, nothing is squirrel proof, and customers kept coming in and buying multiple ones, and so they actually sold it to me. Customers actually were like, oh no, it really works. The thing with squirrel proof feeders that people don't realize, it's all about the way that it hangs. So if you hang it on just a regular shepherd's crook, it puts the hook much closer to the pole. So the little squirrels will come up here and wrap their little legs around here and just reach across and pull that over, right? So that's why this is a 12-inch arm, so it gets it further away. The whole point of squirrel-proof feeders is you want the birds to have to jump. You want them to have to get onto it, right? Because that's what's going to activate it, what's going to shut it down and shut the ports off. So if there's any way that they can get around that, that's what you've got to stop to make them actually work and be squirrel-proof. Safflower and hot pepper are two different ways that you can feed a squirrel deterrent. we won't say it's squirrel proof because some squirrels just don't care. Safflower has it's a naturally bitter taste to it, that they, you know, mammals, like, it would be bitter to us, it's bitter to them. The hot pepper is just that. It's got hot pepper oil that's actually mixed into it. It's way hotter than any cayenne pepper or anything that you can buy. It's not for human consumption, let's put it that way. So it doesn't hurt the squirrels, it's just extremely hot, and typically they can smell it before they actually get to it and try it. But there again, doesn't hurt the birds, they really can't taste it. But during nesting season for squirrels, those two things, safflower and hot pepper, are gonna be a little less, they're not gonna work quite as well because a pregnant squirrel will eat anything that she can get her hands on. So the other thing to remember about food is to be seasonally savvy. So for different seasons, you wanna offer different foods. So that's my yard, that picture right there, that's bark butter. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's just a spreadable suet. You can put it on a feeder. I don't even have a bark butter feeder. I put it straight on trees. So that's right outside my front yard, and there's just a knot hole there, and you just fill it up. It's the good thing about it is you can put it at the base of a tree for all your ground feeders. Okay, so a lot of people forget about that, or just take it and kind of fling it on the ground for all your ground feeders, because there's over 150 different species of birds that will eat it, and it'll attract all kinds. So bluebirds eat it. I had to pick a picture to put up here. I had bluebird, sapsucker, red-bellied, cardinal. So. But everybody loves bluebird, so. But yeah, any bird will eat it. So that is the biggest thing that we sell this time of year is that bark butter. It's high in calcium and it's high in fat, so it's really good for the winter. And then Tracy's got, this is a cool little feeder. If you have a suet feeder already, it's the same size as a suet cake. It's just recycled plastic, and it's got the little grooves routed in it that you would just kind of put that bark butter in. So that's kind of a neat thing. Bark butter bits are the same thing. They're just in a little bit form, so you can mix them in with your seed, or you can just offer them separate, and all that's in hot pepper too. So, winter super blend, we have a winter blend and we have a nesting blend. It just has the different, this one's gonna be higher in fat, so to help fatten up the birds, to help them get through the longer nights over the winter and the colder weather. And one thing people don't think about is millet is really important this time of year. Millet is a ground feeding seed, so if you, like our deluxe blend is the only blend we have that has millet in it. It's the little tiny white seed that's in there, and if you put that kind of seed or put that kind of blend into a feeder, it's typically the stuff that's left at the bottom of the feeder or that you see birds throwing out, because it's intended to be a ground feeding seed. So your towhees love it, but in the wintertime, a lot of the your wintering birds love it. So white-throated sparrows, it's a huge one for them, and dark-eyed juncos, those are the two biggies. So you can just do like a hand, just and it's a very cheap seed. Just get a little 5-pound bag of millet and just toss it on the ground. It typically doesn't attract too many critters. Squirrels leave it alone, skunks don't really like it, so. But that's a good one that a lot of people forget about. So cylinder feeding, that's what we were talking about. That's what is shown right here. There's a bunch of different feeders that it goes in. It's just a cylinder, that's a large one, and then this one is a small that's up there. Where the bluebirds are at. It's seed all the way through. It just has a hole in the middle of it, and so you just unscrew that and thread it on and screw it back on and pop it up there. It does a couple things. One, it lasts a lot longer because it's all seed, and they're not in there flinging it out looking for that perfect seed like they do from feeders. And two, most importantly, is it makes the birds stick around longer, so you can enjoy them longer. Titmice and chickadees are notorious for flying in, grabbing a seed, and flying off, right? So this causes them to have to stick around and actually work for that seed, so you get some more enjoyment out of it. It does last longer, so it's really popular for people that have like second homes or have parents that are in nursing homes. This is what we do, what we have done at Ben Ashley, the veterans home, because it's not, I mean, there's 80-something feeders that are out there, and there's no way that the two guys that work there that are responsible for that could ever keep up with filling 80 seed feeders, you know, basically every day. So one of us goes out probably once a month or so and just checks them, but these cylinders will last for a month or two depending on the time of the year. Okay? So that's a really good option. Okay, a foundational feeder, we don't talk a whole lot, we used to talk a lot about this and we've kind of gotten away from it. But if you're gonna feed, a lot of people will feed more in the winter and take some feeders away in the fall, which I do. I do that with my whole system. I'll just take 2 arms off and put them on and add 2 feeders in the winter. Whatever you do, that's fine, but you need to have what they call a foundational feeder. Birds remember where they get food, just like hummingbirds, that that's been shown that hummingbirds come back to the same place over and over again, year after year. So birds remember where they get food. Now, they do not rely on us. I mean, if everybody in here took every feeder down they had, they're not gonna die. They're gonna be fine. They were here, I mean, they did it without us before, so. But having a foundational feeder up in weather like what shows in that picture, when everything's covered in snow, or right now when everything's just sopping wet and there really is no food out there, they remember where they know they can get food. So you want to have one feeder that's pretty substantial, either a large cylinder or in this case it's a hopper with the tray that you keep full all the time. Even if you let all your other feeders go empty, you just want to have that one that's full all the time so they'll always know where to come back to. Okay. Trace, do you want to take water?
Sure. So not all birds eat seed, not all birds eat bugs, but all birds need water. And just as Lynn was saying earlier, August, September, the beginning part of October, 40 days, 40 nights, we were dry, right? There was nothing here. As he was saying, he saw lots of birds in his bird baths. That is what we were telling people as they came in and asking, where did our birds go? Where did they go? A bird bath will attract more birds than any food we can put out there, more consistently, right? The key to that is to make sure we keep it fresh and clean. If it looks gross to you, it probably is gross to them too, right? So I have 7 bird baths in my yard. While it was really dry over the summer, I was laying lasagna pans filled with water at the ends of my yard because I couldn't keep them full enough. Yes, they were eating from my feeders, but those bird baths, man, they were tearing them up. So if you don't have a bird bath, that's probably the first thing that we would recommend. A water wailer, a dripper, or a mister are things that we can provide that will keep the water moving. Lots of people in the summertime express concern that they don't want to attract mosquitoes, right? So moving water not only keeps mosquitoes away, but moving water always attracts birds because that's the way they see it naturally, right? It's typically moving. Tall versus short, large versus small. There are different sizes of bird baths. This we would call a small, which is a 14-inch pan. I'm not going to try to do that. There's also a 20-inch pan that we will call a large. And can anybody guess who's going to go into who? Into what? Small birds typically go into the small ones, right? And the large birds typically go into the large ones. Does that mean that you'll never see a chickadee in something like this? Absolutely not. But what we can do is we can put some flat river rocks into something like this and make it more attractive to everything. So we would recommend doing something like that. And the same thing, tall versus short. Something on the ground and then something up high gives everybody an opportunity to get to them, right? And then heated bird baths. So we're pretty fortunate here. It typically, it gets below freezing. It doesn't happen all the time. I'm from Pittsburgh, so I'm used to having to go out there, and do something to my bird bath every day. But here it happens occasionally. And unless you want to go out there in your PJs and in your robe with some hot water every morning, we might suggest doing something like a heated bird bath that has an internal thermostat that'll turn on when it goes below freezing and will turn off when it goes above freezing. So you just leave it plugged in and really forget about it. And that's something that can make sure that the birds have fresh water all the time.
Okay, so that in that picture is this bird bath. Again, that's my yard, and I know that the second thing up there says keep it clean and fresh. Please read that. Don't pay attention to the picture. It's kind of opposite of what that says. But so this bath, I use this year round. This is the heated bird bath. I just unplug it, and it actually comes with a bracket for your deck. And so you can just unscrew that bracket, wrap this up underneath it, and screw that bracket back on, and it holds that cord up there. But so we've had this is the 12th year,
Probably.
12th year for this bird bath, and it fired up just fine. It's worked great. So it never comes in. However, if you wanted to, these stands that are up here, I know you guys in the back can't see them, but the tall and the small, they hold, the 20-inch holds this, and it also holds that dish she was just holding up. So they're interchangeable. A lot of people will get one of these and use it in the winter, get one of those and just switch it out, you know? So it's up to you, but I use mine year round and it works great. The only other thing I was gonna say about the tall and the short, going back to trying to create this bird sanctuary or this bird friendly yard, a lot of people come in and they're like, okay, I got all my native plants planted and I've got this beautiful flower garden out there and I wanna put a bird bath in it. Do I do a short or a tall? Well, keep in mind too about predators. So we always tell people short bird baths closer to the ground are typically a little bit more popular with birds than the taller ones, and definitely more so than hanging ones, okay? But if you put a short one in a bird bath, I should put a short bird bath in a flower garden, there's so many places for cats to hide.
Yeah.
For anything like that. And some people don't really think about, because it looks pretty, right? You're just thinking, oh, it looks really good, I'll just set that there. But I've actually watched it happen at my house, and I knew better, and I still did it anyway. So learn from my mistakes. Don't make that same mistake. So if you're putting it in a flower garden or something like that, just make sure that there is enough space that the birds can see a predator coming, and enough coverage that they can get somewhere if they were to see a predator coming. So just something to keep in mind when you're talking about placement of different things. So years and years ago, I was a customer here, and Tracy worked here, and that's how we first met. And I came in and I was like, I am trying to get bluebirds. I can see them. They're sitting on the fence between my yard and my neighbor's yard, and they would just look at me like, coming over there. And I spent so much money on live mealworms, and they would just be like, nah, we're good. And I came in and talked to Tracy. I was like, I can't do it. I mean, I've been trying forever to try and get them. And she said, do you have water out? And I said, no. She's like, put a bird bath out. Okay. So I put one out. This was the first winter after I put it out. Yeah. And that poor little house finch was like, I had made a wrong turn somewhere. But I mean, that's what did it. You know, and after they started coming to the water, keeping it out, then start putting out your food and stuff like that. So a lot of people come in, they're like, I want bluebirds. Well, when do you see them, right? If you don't, you know, you may not have a yard for them, or, you know, it may be that you end up wasting a lot of time and money trying to attract them. However, if you see them and you're like, I just want to get them to come eat in my yard and all that kind of stuff, it can be expensive to buy those, like a bluebird feeder, and start, you know, racking up dollars on live mealworms, where you could literally put a lasagna dish out there with water and just see if you can get them to come in with that, and then move forward from there.
So, in my neighborhood where I live, I have the house on the right and a house on the left that both have up bluebird houses. And they do well. Every year they get at least a brood or two. I can't get a bluebird in my house for nothing. I tell them that I work at the bird store and they're making me look bad, but they don't care. But back to those 7 bird baths. Guess who I get to see, and guess who I get to see with all the babies. They always come to my yard to drink water. So not every yard is a great yard for housing. Not every yard is a great yard for food. Most yards are a great yard for water. So that's the best way to see things.
I got one of those hanging ones on my deck. Would that thing fit it, or would I have to get a different size chain for it?
Yeah, the small one would fit it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that you could do a heated right now.
Yeah.
I'll get something.
And with hanging bird baths, they're great. They'll come drink out of them a lot. A lot of times you'll see less bathing in them, just because there's not a lot of stability, right? They get in there and start moving around and it just swings. But they're great to put on a deck just to see them come and drink from.
That would be good to just mount to the deck, that thing with the heat.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the biggest thing with birding in your backyard or backyard bird feeding is patience. And I am the most impatient person you'll ever meet. I mean, terribly impatient. So it took 2 years for me, for what happened next in this picture to happen, and it just happened a week ago. Yep.
I need one or two.
Yep. It took 2 years. I could hear them. They were in the trees. I could see them. And I walked out I'd move that bird bath around everywhere, trying to just find the right spot to have them come down. Never could get them to come down, never could get them. And I was walking out to come to work the other day through the screened-in porch, and their sound, if you've never heard them, it's just like a real high-pitched, like a whistle, sort of. It was so loud, it was almost deafening, and I was like, what is happening? And I stuck my head around there, and I was like, and of course I had my hands full, and I'm like, couldn't even get my phone out to take a picture. So luckily the next day, and they continue to come back, but it's taken literally years to get that to happen. So you got it, and that's coming from an impatient person. So.
Is that the heated?
That is that's the same heated one. So
Any question about that?
Same dirty heater.
What are they? I can't tell.
cedar waxwings.
Okay.
Sorry. And they don't eat, and that's a perfect example. They don't eat seed. They're not seed eaters. And I don't have any, at this moment, I don't have any burying bushes in my yard. So I knew that's why they weren't coming down to eat. So the only other option I had to get them there was water. And it works. So. All right, so shelter. Shelter can be man-made or it can be natural. So Lynn talked about the natural kinds of shelter with different bushes and flowers and shrubs and things like that. What we offer are nest boxes. The most common one is going to be your bluebird box, right? So bluebirds, like, I don't know when they started their numbers started coming back up, but at some point they were almost extinct, right? And then they started doing the bluebird boxes and bluebird trails, and so thanks to us,
1920s they were considered rare.
Rare, okay. And then now they're flourishing. So it's still, I mean, like Tracy said, some yards are good for nesting, some are not. I actually don't have that good of a yard for nesting. I'm not even quite certain if that female actually nested in that box. I might have just like got a picture of her just checking it out before she ever went in. Now I don't have, it's hard for bluebirds to nest in my yard, but I get wrens nesting all the time. So just because you can't get bluebirds doesn't mean you can't get something else that nests, okay? Roosting is also important. That's another thing that's kind of overlooked in the wintertime. So bluebird boxes can be used for roosting. What roosting is where birds go into shelter to get out of inclement weather or cold weather. The main differences in nesting and roosting is, one, multiple birds of different species will roost together in one box. Okay, so you may have like downy woodpeckers are notorious for it. You may have downy woodpeckers and bluebirds in a box together, okay? So it's important to clean out your boxes when you're going into winter, usually like around the end of August. Yeah, 1st of September, you want to go out and just, because nesting's basically over. You want to just go clean out that box to get it ready for roosting. They do not bring in any kind of material for roosting. They're not going to get it dirty. I mean, they're not going to bring in straw. They're not building anything. They're just going in there to get out of the weather. The other thing that you can do is we have nesting pockets, which are these little things, and they're really cute. These are going to be for wrens. I mean, you're not going to have anything else go in there. These are the best place for those is as close to your house as you can get it, okay? So like right outside the window, right off your front porch, right outside your back door, or whatever, because wrens love to be close to your house, okay? And they will use that. Mine use it year round. There's 2 of them that go in there, and they, about the same time, when the time changes, it goes from 7 to 6. So usually around 7, they're calling to each other and they go in there, and then when time changes, it's at 6. But they use it year round, and it's right outside of my front door. So, and they don't care. I mean, like, we come and go through that door, and they don't care.
I've had several families raised in mine,
Oh, have you?
little wrens.
Are you talking about
I've got a few
house
great
wrens or?
No, Carolina wrens.
Carolina.
Yeah, Carolina wrens. Yeah. Yeah, house wrens won't really use the roosting pockets. House wrens are a competitor for bluebird boxes, as are tree swallows. But not all birds use houses. But a lot of people will come in and say, I really want, a house for a cardinal. Cardinals don't use houses. There are some other things that, you can do, but that's going to get into like the more natural shelter, planting the shrubs that are 5 to 8 feet off the ground. That's where cardinals typically will build their nests. Or holly trees are really good for mockingbird nests. So that's where the more native stuff's going to come in place for those birds that don't use houses. Of the birds that use houses, there's primary, secondary, and substrate nesters. So your primary nesters are your woodpeckers. They're the ones that actually make their own hole, okay? And as far as I know, the one in my, woodpeckers don't reuse holes, right? They make new ones every year. So I've got one tree in my yard that's got, I didn't put the picture in here, but it probably has to have 10 or 12 holes in it where they've just nested, you know, all for however many times. But they will make their, owls are primary? No, they're not. Owls?
Owls will reuse.
They'll reuse,
But they
okay.
don't add anything to it.
Okay. So the main ones that we see are gonna be your different woodpeckers that are primary. Secondary are everybody else that just like lets the woodpeckers do the work and then they take the house. So
Squatters, kinda like squatter grass.
yeah, so bluebirds, I mean, anything that would use a box that we would put out, because, I mean, we haven't made the box, we bought it and we put it up, so we did the work, they're just moving in, right? So, bluebirds will reuse, woodpecker holes, titmice, chickadees, anything that uses a box is considered a secondary. A substrate nester is like a dove or a robin, they build on a substrate or a platform. Okay, so robins are known for like your downspout where it comes down from your roof line and then goes out.
A windowsill.
Yeah, they'll make a beautiful nest up there. Yeah. And house finches are another substrate. They're the ones that make it, you know, on top of your ceiling fan in your covered porch. House finches. Doves are another substrate nester, and their nests look like, I don't even know how it supports them. I don't know how, I mean, there's like 2 sticks.
They're minimal nesters.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get going.
Yeah, and you have like, they got 2 sticks crossed, and I think we're good.
One bird made a nest inside the windowsill. They got in between the screen and the window and had babies, so they got to watch it in the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they don't have very often, but yeah, that's what they did.
Wow. Pretty cool. Placement of the box is really important. When we talk about a bluebird box, all that means is that the measurements are right for bluebirds. So the hole size is right, the size of the interior measurements of the box are right for bluebird. A wren house, that is the same thing. The hole size is right. The interior measurements are right for a wren. That does not mean that a wren is the only one that's gonna use this, or a bluebird's the only one that's gonna use that. Basically, if a bird is large enough to fit in here, or small enough to fit in here, it'll use this, right? If a bird is small enough to fit in there, it'll use that uses the box. So when you talk about being a bluebird box or a wren box or a titmouse box, or we actually have downy woodpecker boxes, it's all about placement. So the closer you are to your house when you place it, the more likely you are to get something like a wren, okay? If you have a wood line or a wooded area, the closer you put to that wood line or that wooded area, you're more likely getting into like titmice back in that area, okay? Somewhere in between is gonna be your chickadees, okay? And that's just a general rule of thumb. That's not in concrete or stone or anything, but you could put the same kind of house in those 3 spots and get 3 different types of birds just based on the placement of it. So that's something else to think about when you're doing your yard, trying to get your yard all set up. Putting up 2 bluebird boxes in a typical backyard in Knoxville is not gonna get you 2 bluebird families. They will not nest that close together. What putting up 2 boxes does is it eliminates any competition that there was for that box. So if you have tree swallows that are fighting the bluebirds to get to that box, put up a second box. They're fine. One of them will take one box and one will take the other. So it's pretty easy to solve that problem. But putting up 2 bluebird boxes, they have to be way out of sight of one another. So unless you've got a lot of property that you can really stretch them out on, you're probably not going to get 2 bluebird families nesting in there. Snakes, raccoons, squirrels, possums, skunks, that was just the only critters that came to mind I could think of, and everything else. Snakes and raccoons are the biggest predators for boxes, okay? That baffle that's on there is a raccoon baffle. It'll help against snakes. We actually have predator guards, we're out of them right now, but that you can also put on the front that are just they're like wire and they're kind of spiky, which work a little bit better for snakes because they have to come up and around and try to keep from scratching their belly on the sharp edges. We recommend that people always start out with one of those 2 things, because even people are like, oh, I don't have snakes. You have snakes. You have snakes. And maybe you don't have raccoons yet, But that's like people when they come in and they just get started feeding and they're like, I don't have squirrels. And we're like, yes, yes, you're gonna have them. So it's always good to start out with one because there's nothing worse than getting a phone call here from somebody who is literally in tears because they've gone out there and the nest has been pulled out and a raccoon's gotten a hold of it and the babies are dead. And it's terrible. So squirrels, possums, and skunks are not really gonna bother it. They care more about the food. They don't really care about the eggs or the babies. Snakes are going to be more likely to take the eggs. Once the babies are born, there's actually a little fight in them and they don't really want them. They're like, whatever, I'd rather just eat the eggs. Raccoons will take whatever they can get and they eat trash. They're scavengers. So the one way to tell the difference, if you walk out there one day and you check the box and you're like, oh, look, I've got my eggs in there and they're so cute. And you go out the next day and they're not there. If the nest is intact and the eggs are gone, it's a snake. If you go out there and the nest has been pulled out, that's a raccoon. Because snakes will just go right in, eat the eggs, and go right back out. The raccoons can't get in there, so they're reaching in and just pulling out by the handful. Okay, so that's a good way to tell the difference. But
Did you have a question?
I put those up there because people ask about that with houses. They're like, well, what about possums or skunks and squirrels? And they don't really mess with the houses that much. Skunks will come and eat the stuff that's on the ground around your feeders.
So that's what she's saying, that not all wildlife will bother a box.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah,
typically
your main
just
two
raccoons.
things are just snakes and raccoons that you need to worry about with the boxes.
Right.
So, like I'm thinking about my son, I know that he lives in the city and they have had to fend off skunks under their basement. So if he was to put a feeder out there with ground feeding, he should not do that because
He needs to do no mess feeding
Yeah,
that
no
doesn't
mess.
leave any shells on the ground. Shells are what will attract things that are left that birds can't eat.
Yeah, for no mess, anything that's dropped on the ground will get eaten by a bird. So it's not gonna be there's not gonna be anything there to attract any critters in. And a lot of times the skunks are actually attracted by the bugs that the shells attract. So the less you can have on the ground, the less likelihood you are to have anything show up to eat the remnants. But I mean, if you don't have dogs, skunks and possums are actually really good to have. I mean, skunks will clean up your backyard. They will also eat
Mice and rats.
yellow jacket nests.
And possums eat ticks.
And possums eat ticks. So, so anyway, those are the two things you need to worry about with houses. Possums won't bother anything. You don't have to worry about them.
So you're telling me a raccoon's gonna pull the stuff from inside the nest through that hole?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. All right, just an example. That's a primary cavity nester. That's my owl box. It's never had an owl in it. It does have a flicker in it right there. It's had everything but an owl in it. That's the roosting pocket we were talking about. Okay, and you can see his little tail sticking up right there. These are great pictures. This is a friend of Tracy's, so.
She lives, she's a beautiful house, right outside of Asheville, and she has mountain views. And I told her to watch out. She said, oh, I love having my hummingbird feeders there. And I told her to watch out that raccoons are notorious to come, that, you know, when they need a monster and they need a little bit of energy, they will grab a hummingbird feeder in a heartbeat. And she said, oh, I don't have to worry about that. I am up so high. And about 4 or 5 days later, I got those pictures. And she literally is off of a cliff. So this bugger was, yeah, he was rock climbing for sure. And he's, you know, not only do we see them at night, but see how many she has. He was like, jackpot, I'm coming during the day. So we hear that a lot here. I don't have raccoons. Well, we don't see raccoons because they come out typically when we're not out there. They're out there typically from dusk until dawn, right? Birds feed from dawn until dusk. So when you go to sleep with your feeder upright and you wake up with your feeder on the ground, that's typically a raccoon, not a squirrel. They get a lot of blame and it's not always them.
Okay, this is the last thing. So we offer a service called feederscaping. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with that, but it's basically yard consultation. So what we were talking about different placements and you know, where you put your flower garden versus what kind of bird bath you put. With feederscaping, one of us will come out to your house or business, it's for both. We'll evaluate your property, and typically the first question we ask is, where do you want to be able to see the birds from? And then with that, asking a couple questions, we'll gather that information, and then we will actually recommend to you the best feeder, food, water source, and different accessories that you can put in your yard to maximize that, to make it the most bird-friendly yard you can make it, based on what information you give us. So we have a list of questions we'll ask, and so that is something that we offer. We also we do install. Now, the thing with that, if you go to like Home Depot and buy a pole system and you're like, hey, I just bought this at Home Depot, can you come install it? We're not gonna come install it. But for feederscapings, or if people come in and they buy, you know, a pole system or whatever, you know, we can come out and do installations. The feederscaping party is a new concept, and this just came about kind of by accident. Tracy and I went out and a lady came in, she was buying a feederscaping for her friend's birthday, and she said, I will be there, it's a surprise. She said, I'll be there, and 2 of our other friends will be there. And we were like, oh, it's like a birthday party. She was like, yeah. I was like, okay. So we were the birthday surprise. So we got there, and all 4 of the women were there, and so we kind of explained to them what we were gonna do. We went out there and we did it, and we came back in, and the lady goes, okay, so are you ready to present? And I was like, sure, okay, yeah, we'll present. So they all sat down, and we kind of went over, talked about in her yard where we would place stuff and what we recommended.
And who we heard and who we saw.
Yeah, and we told her about what kind of birds we heard out there and what we saw out there and what she had the potential to attract. And then followed up by a bunch of questions from from her and the other 3 ladies. And then 2 of the other 3 called and wanted it done at their house. So it's something that, you know, the feederscaping parties are kind of like think of like a Tupperware party, right? So like you have it, one person hosts like a host house, right? And we'll come out and do a feederscaping there so that other people can get an idea of what it's like. And then we can hopefully spread the word that way. So, but they're fun to do. They're fun for us. They're fun for you guys. You're under no obligation to purchase any of the stuff that we recommend. A lot of times what we've started doing is we'll take all the information, come back, we'll sketch it out. We will photograph the different products, and then we'll take notes, and we'll number it, and we'll dummy proof it, even for us. And we started doing it so that if customers come in and whoever did the feederscaping isn't here, anybody can go grab that paperwork and know what we were talking about and what feeders to go get. But we do it now with sketches and photographs, and then we will scan all that and email it to you, so you have all that information and you can kind of chew on it.
Do what you want when you want.
How far do you go?
Well, typically we would go 30 miles from the store, which is pretty good. It'll get you like into it, but I mean, that's not set in stone. Just go ask us. Yeah. So, but we have gone 30 miles outside the store. We've gone further. So, and then the last thing I was going to say today. So feederscapings are really fun to buy for people. Like if you don't have what to buy your mom or whatever, I mean, buy them a feederscaping, and it's $25. And it's that, you would get that on the back, it's got your little to and from, and it's got a description of what we just talked about, and then all they have to do is when they're ready, they just call and set up an appointment. Then we would go out, okay? So what we're doing today is, with the purchase of any box setups or equivalent of our hardware pole, the advanced pole system here, you get this for free, okay? So, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's interesting, if nothing else, just to have us come out there and tell you what the potential is that you could get in your yard. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, this is from a feederscaping that we did, just super quick. And we don't have time, so I can't really go into it. But do you want to say real fast what's that?
Oh yeah, that's a friend of mine. She called. She's been a customer here for years. She just bought some property on the Holston River in South Knoxville, and she knew she had a good bird yard. She knew she did, but she was like, that's really all I know. So we went out, and boy, did she ever. She has like a bluebird haven. So we were able to place a bluebird box with a raccoon baffle. We placed a foundational feeder here on the left-hand bottom. We did a cylinder feeder outside of her husband's office. And then we did those two on the right-hand side, we did some tube feeders outside of the kitchen.
And
She
that
couldn't
would
be happier.
Yeah, and that would be an example of that's so close that a squirrel could get to it. That's why there's no baffle on it. There's no point in it. So that's an example of where you would use safflower or hot pepper. Okay, so something like that's kind of stuff we'll recommend when we come out. This is just a really cool. This is a customer's house. Those are bats. And it looks like a car dealership. Cars are like lined up. But she came in, they had bats in their attic, and so she wanted to keep them, but she didn't want them in there, so she bought a single chamber. And then she came back about 3 days later and bought a triple chamber, and then later that day sent us a picture to us. So bats are excellent to have around. A lot of people don't like them, but they're fantastic for mosquitoes. And tree swallows are good to have because they are the daytime bats, because they eat mosquitoes in the day and the bats eat them at night. But that's just a really cool picture. And that's so you want it to be like at the top of it, as high up as you can go, like on a building. You can put it on a post. It's got to be like 15 feet up. The main thing is, or you can put it on a tree. The main thing is so bats can't flap their wings and fly like birds do. Okay, they more glide. So there has to be about 10 to 15 feet of clearance underneath. Like, so she's standing underneath that, taking it up. But underneath that bat house, there has to be 10 to 15 feet of clearance so that they can just release from that house and drop down and catch the air and swoop up. Same for getting back in there. They've got to come down and swoop up. It's like a runway. So you can't put it on a tree with limbs and stuff underneath it. So typically the best place is on the side of a house or a barn or something like that. But that's also something else we can help you with placing.
Yeah.
And this is see who gets it.
Oh.
I'm gonna tell you something. I bought one of those metal cages to keep stuff out of my squirrels. It worked great, but I had some really stubborn squirrels. I swear, I've got pictures of those little suckers were trying their damnedest. And it was funny to watch. The only bad thing with those is if you got any big woodpeckers and stuff, they can't get through it either. That's the only downside. But man, that was fun. We take videotapes of the stupid squirrel climbing. They're doing acrobatics trying to get into that thing.
Yeah, they'll try for sure.
Oh, yeah.
The last slide, if you guys want to copy down this, it's kind of hard to see. It's just www.certified-your-yard/. And that will take you to our website, which has a link and a video explaining everything. That's the National Wildlife Federation's yard certification program. So that's it.
We are taking January off from our Wild Birds University, but we'll be back.